Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. Nous n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière de travailler, nos communautés, nos vies. Construisons mieux, construisons ensemble. Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. Nous n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière de travailler, nos communautés, nos vies. Construisons mieux, construisons ensemble. Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. Nous n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière de travailler, nos communautés, nos vies. Construisons mieux, construisons ensemble. Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. Nous n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière de travailler, nos communautés, nos vies. Construisons mieux, construisons ensemble. Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. Nous n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière de travailler, nos communautés, nos vies. Construisons mieux, construisons ensemble. Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. Nous n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière de travailler, nos communautés, nos vies. Construisons mieux, construisons ensemble. Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. Nous n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière de travailler, nos communautés, nos vies. Construisons mieux, construisons ensemble. Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. Nous n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière de travailler, nos communautés, nos vies. Construisons mieux, construisons ensemble. Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. Nous n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière de travailler, nos communautés, nos vies. Construisons mieux, construisons ensemble. Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. Nous n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière. Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. Nous n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière de travailler, nos communautés, nos vies. Construisons mieux, construisons ensemble. Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. Nous n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière de travailler, nos communautés, nos vies. Construisons mieux, construisons ensemble. Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière de travailler, nos communautés, nos vies. Construisons mieux, construisons ensemble. Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. Nous n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière de travailler, nos communautés, nos vies. Construisons mieux, construisons ensemble. Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. Nous n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière de travailler, nos communautés, nos vies. Construisons mieux, construisons ensemble. Nous avons eu besoin de faire 2 pas en arrière pour mieux nous rapprocher. Malgré nos différences, notre fragilité nous rassemble et nous pousse à être solidaires. Notre société a tourné une page et va entamer un nouveau chapitre. Nous n'avions rien vu venir, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons la possibilité de tout reconstruire. Chacun a un rôle à jouer pour redéfinir nos relations, notre manière de travailler, nos communautés, nos vies. Construisons mieux, construisons ensemble.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear shareholders, good morning. I'm very happy to welcome you for this new combined ordinary and extraordinary meeting of shareholders, which is being held in very exceptional circumstances in order to abide by the restrictions imposed on us by the government in the context of the COVID-19 crisis and to protect everybody's health. We decided to hold this annual meeting of shareholders by adapting it to the health-related measures. So our shareholders meeting is being held in camera, behind closed doors, taking place in the AXA head office and being streamed live. So we took all necessary measures to make sure that this meeting remains a high time for sharing and exchanging with you as shareholders. I would like to thank all shareholders who voted by mail ahead of our shareholders meeting, either by using their voting form or via the internet, and who are attending this meeting. Before we appoint the panel officers, I would like to take some little time to express my deep sympathy and support to all those people who have been affected by this crisis in any way. I also would like to express my best wishes and warmest thank yous for all those who helped us weather these very difficult times. I would like also to thank all our employees who proved extremely agile, extremely dedicated, and made it possible for us to continue our operations in the last few months. So it is in a very select small group that I will be moderating this meeting. I have next to me Thomas Boubel, CEO, Jean-Pierre Clamadieu, Lead Director and Chair of the Compensation Governance Committee, and Etienne Bois-Laurent, the Chief Financial Officer of the group. The directors of your company, who usually participate in this meeting in person, are attending this meeting from a distance. I would like to thank them for their dedication and their active contribution to the work of our board. Also, I would like to greet Madame Isabelle Hudson and Marie-France Trudin, as well as Antoine Gosset-Granville, whose name will be put to your vote as new directors and who are also participating in this meeting from a distance. Let us now do the formalities to officially open this meeting. This meeting is being held today on the first notice of meeting. It was convened by a notice of meeting which was published in the official legal bulletin. A convening notice was published on the 21st of March in 2020, and in the Les Petites Affiches legal bulletin of March 2020, and a corrective convening notice was published in the legal bulletin on the 8th of June 2020, and the Les Petites Affiches legal bulletin of the 8th of June as well. So I would now like to appoint the meeting officers. In my capacity of chair, as the board of directors, I would chair this meeting. The scrutineers will be AXA, Assurance, ARD Mutuel, as represented by Nicolas Magnier, and the AXA Assurance Vie Mutuelle Company, as represented by Madame Aurélie Langlois-Colson, both of them being present. I thank them for their agreement to serve as scrutineers, and Etienne Bois-Laurent will be the secretary to this meeting. So we have now a meeting. We have meeting our officers, I inform you that our statutory auditors, PricewaterhouseCoopers, in the person of Bénédicte Vignon and Mazar, in the person of Jean-Claude Pauly, were convened. I also want to say that all shareholders, having requested it, have received the documents and information as provided by law, or were able to become knowledgeable of these documents on the website of the company. I remind you that since the shareholders meeting is being held in camera, all of the voting of resolutions already took place by mails. We collected all your votes in hard copy paper format until the 27th of June midnight, and those expressed by internet until 3 p.m. on the 29th of June. So 12,515 shareholders voted by mail, representing 1,461,523,315 shares and 1,827,467,318 voices, representing respectively 61.31% of all shares and 64.83% of existing voting rights. And so we have reached quorum, and the meeting can validly deliberate in its ordinary and extraordinary format. And the result of the voting will be presented at the end of the meeting by Etienne Bois-Laurent. And we are convening this meeting in its extraordinary and ordinary format for you to decide on 23 ordinary and extraordinary resolutions. As is the case every year, I suggest I don't read out in extenso the agenda for the meeting, and to get informed of the simplified agenda, which is up on your screen. I also ask you to authorize me not to read out the Board of Directors report, which is included in the AXA 2019 annual report, which is now called Universal Registration Document. This report has been made available to you at the head office of the company or was sent to you upon request. I will now give the floor to Thomas Bubel, who will be presenting to you the strategy and prospects and outlook for AXA. But before that, let us watch a short video which will review the key highlights since the Ambition 2020 plan was launched. Good morning, dear shareholders. I'm extremely happy to be here today for this meeting of shareholders of the AXA Group, even though I would have liked that, as is the case usually, we could welcome you in person. Current circumstances have it, and the current crisis impose on us that we exceptionally organize the shareholders meeting in this manner, behind closed doors. I will, in a few minutes, review the hard consequences of this crisis of unprecedented magnitude, both with respect to health and its impact on the economy. And I will also be reviewing the measures we took ever since the crisis hit us. But before that, I would like to review the situation of AXA at the beginning of 2020. And I would like to present to you the strategy we implemented ever since 2016 when we launched our Ambition 2020 plan. So, in the Ambition 2020 plan, we focused on 4 areas, focusing on growing business operations as they meet true needs and requirements, which have been growing, especially on the back of this crisis. Number 2, innovation, focusing on the expectations and needs of our customers. Number 3, a permanent and continual commitment and dedication for society and the planet. And number 4, transformation of the risk profile of the AXA Group, combined with continual discipline in the way we manage our balance sheet. So we have decided to develop key segment in the context of our strategic plan. These key segments are commercial P&C business, health, and protection business. These lines of business show great growth potential because they meet needs for protection which have grown ever since the crisis hit us. They will be offering more frequent possibilities of interaction and touch points with our clients and customers, and are as many opportunities for us to provide added value to them. In 2019, I've been very satisfied because these three key segments have all showed high growth and have significantly contributed to the growth of all of our business activity in 2019. Up 7% in commercial P&C, up 6% in health, and up 4% in protection. At the end of fiscal 2019, these three key segments accounted for more than 60% of AXA's revenues. We want to also develop innovation which will prove useful to our clients and customers, to create services and to provide better service. The goal and ambition is really to improve their access to health while simplifying their lives on a day-to-day basis. These will enable them to protect against risks which are difficult to cover. A few examples. Telemedicine. This telemedicine service was launched in France and elsewhere in the world, and we pioneered the way, and AXA remains one of the leaders. The same went with the opening of integrated health care centers in emerging countries. We already opened 2 such health centers in Mexico and in Egypt, the goal being to open 50 healthcare centers to serve 1.5 million customers in the emerging markets by 2023. Our partnership with ING will aim at creating a digital platform to provide simplified insurance solutions for the banking clients of ING. Finally, let me mention AXA Climate. This is our business unit which is dedicated to the protection against climate risks, which offers parametric insurance solutions, for example, against hail, against drought, or excessive cold. And AXA is also engaged against and has been engaged against climate global warming since 2015. And AXA was the first company to stop investments in the coal sector. In 2019, we started a new phase in our climate strategy while embarking on very bold and ambitious objectives. As an investor, AXA decided to double our goal to increase green investments to 12 billion euros. To 24 billion euros, sorry. We also decided to support the goals of AXA and of society to green the economy with the launch of the so-called transition bonds. Also, we developed an ambition to limit the warming potential of our investments to 1.5 degrees by 2050, which is fully in line with the Paris Agreement. As an insurer, via our underwriting policy, we also factored in the consequences of the crisis, and we are fostering those products which respond to climatic resilience. We also take part in many collective initiatives. As an example, we share our expertise in the Net Zero Asset Alliance. At AXA, we have started a transformation of our AXA risk profile. First, we have reduced our exposure to financial risks after the financial crisis of 2008. We showed that we could do this over time, and the complete exit of our life and saving business in the US illustrates the execution of this strategy. We finalized the sell-down of Equitable holdings last year after doing an IPO with this company in March of 2018. All in all, it generated proceeds on the order of $11.5 billion. We also continued to reduce our indebtedness as we committed to that when we acquired the XL Group in 2019, as we slightly increased our indebtedness. In late 2019, the level of indebtedness of the group was 29%, down 3 percentage points year on year. And in Q1 of 2020, we continued this deleveraging of the company. Thanks to our management discipline and thanks to the relevance of our strategy, AXA is a very robust group. This robustness is clearly illustrated in the numbers of our balance sheet in late 2019. 70 billion euros in shareholders' equity, 698% of solvency ratio as at 31st of December 2019. These numbers increased in fiscal 2019, and this robustness I mentioned clearly testifies to our ability to meet our commitments, those commitments we took vis-à-vis our clients and customers, and also enabled us to weather a very tough crisis. It is important that we continue this discipline in management and to keep showing this robustness, as we always need to be capable of confronting unprecedented crises as the one which is hitting us in 2020. In the face of the health and economic crisis, which is of unprecedented magnitude, AXA's response was in 3 areas. First, we worked to ensure the safety of our employees and our AXA agents, helping them to serve our clients and customers from a distance. Then, in a very significant manner, we contributed to efforts and initiatives of solidarity in many regions and countries of the world. And finally, we played a very active role in exiting the crisis to contribute to restore the footing of the economies, countries, and companies. And in the face of the health and economic crisis impacted by COVID-19, our priority has first and foremost been to protect our employees and our AXA agents by giving them the means and resources so that they could serve our clients and customers from a distance. All our teams, in this way, worked from home very quickly and have kept serving our clients and customers from a distance. As an example, we have insured disease, and we have provided coverage and compensation for sick leave, and we have insured 500 million of compensation paid out for event cancellation cases. AXA protected the jobs of its employees during the lockdown period. We did not solicit the financial help and assistance provided by the state. We did not benefited from the so-called partial employment, and we did not get any tax break. In addition to these measures, AXA significantly contributed to efforts and initiatives of national solidarity. In the field of health, we offered to extend our death and disability coverage and insurance coverage to the most vulnerable customers. We also supported and assisted the medical staff by ordering more than 2 million face masks, and we also opened some of our remote consulting services to the greater number. We thus contributed to help and facilitate access to health care. AXA also helped its corporate clients in France. We provided insurance to more than 350,000 companies, and we have really assisted these companies by a number of measures. We froze the premiums and contributions for tradespeople, for professionals, and shopkeepers in France. We refunded 2 months of premiums and contributions for companies who shut down their business operations in France, and we maintained their coverage even when they delayed the payment of their premiums. With more than 50 million euros paid by way of compensation, we are the first contributor to the French State Solidarity Fund. All in all, AXA allocated some 400 million euros by way of solidarity initiatives and efforts to provide support and assistance to its most vulnerable clients, working above and beyond our contractual obligations to take up our social responsibility and to meet our obligations and beyond, to show our support and solidarity. Behind these numbers and behind these initiatives and measures, these are dozens of thousands of AXA employees and agents who worked day and night to provide service and assistance to our clients and customers so that they could weather this crisis as best as possible. And I would really like to warmly thank them for their dedication, for the support and solidarity they showed. AXA today is fully engaged to reboot the economy and to contribute to rebuilding a much more resilient society. First, by providing support to research activities. 12 million euros were allocated to research and development in the form of the AXA Fund for Research. Also, we have provided support by way of our investments, and the insurance industry has fully played its role as providing support and solidarity. In France, the insurance industry already has announced investments on the order of 1.5 billion euros to reboot the economy, and AXA, in addition to these amounts, will contribute an additional 500 million euros to invest in French regions in a very targeted manner, targeting very small and middle-sized enterprises, as those companies are the ones who need the greatest assistance to restore their production capabilities. Our role is to support and bolster these companies which have been weakened by the crisis and to provide any support and assistance we can with these initiatives so they can survive and look up towards the future. In order to build up a more resilient society, we have provided new protection products. We have fully understood that in many cases, the risk of a pandemic was not covered by insurance. This is why we pioneered the way to set up collective measures jointly with citizens jointly with the government and the governments to come up with a new coverage policy against exceptional disasters. This coverage is called a CATEX and has been developed based on a public-private partnership. And the existing natural catastrophe policies inspired us. AXA is a very robust group. This is why we were able to take very responsible action and measures vis-à-vis all of its stakeholders right from the beginning of the crisis. We were able to manage the equilibrium of all stakeholders, which was a key effort for us. The AXA Group was able to maintain employment, the jobs and compensation of its employees during the lockdown period. We took measures in addition to our contractual obligations to help the corporate clients which were the most impacted by the crisis. Also, AXA participated to the French national solidarity effort as one of the leading contributors, and we provided funds so that companies could restore their business operations after the crisis. It is quite normal that AXA shows as responsible vis-à-vis its individual and institutional shareholders, which contributed to the robustness of AXA. And in this respect, I would like to warmly thank each and every one of you for your dedication and your loyalty towards the AXA Group. But AXA, as a group, also needs to listen to the recommendations expressed by regulators who call for caution and prudence in this period of crisis. We also have made a decision, while maintaining the equilibrium of stakeholders, to submit to your vote the payout of a dividend in 2020 for fiscal 2019, with a dividend payout amount which was revised downward. We have a clear strategy. And right since our Ambition 2020 plan was launched, we have been implementing this plan with discipline and determination. AXA is a robust group. AXA proved it was solid throughout this crisis. We can build upon a very solid, strong balance sheet. We have been managing our obligations vis-à-vis our clients and customers over the short term to help weather this crisis, but also over the long term to contribute to our society. We are dedicated to serve our clients. We are dedicated to contribute to the economy and to the general society to boost a responsible economy. Ever since our Ambition 2020 strategic plan was launched, many key decisions and key measures were taken to accelerate AXA Group's transformation. In 2019, it appeared useful to us that we took some hindsight, that we could take some time together with our employees to come up with the words which define us the best and which have a stick, that is our purpose. And the current crisis has only reinforced our belief that it was useful to engage in such a process.
Notre raison d'être exprime notre utilité en tant qu'assureur, notre engagement dans la société, mais aussi notre culture de l'entreprise, c'est-à-dire la manière dans laquelle nous agissons. Je vous propose de la découvrir en images et laisserai ensuite Ulrike Decoen, directrice de la marque, de la communication et de la responsabilité d'entreprise, vous présenter la démarche qui a été la nôtre, notre sens, notre utilité que nous comptons donner à notre raison d'être.
Today, risks are evolving constantly. They threaten our ability to make progress, to progress individually, collectively, progress for the planet. We are acting to understand them, to anticipate them, and to protect ourselves against them, so that our clients and our society at large can take a step forward positively, and our people, 160,000 people, can move forward to serve our purpose and act for human progress, protecting what matters. Act for human progress and protecting what matters. No, you can. Good day, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today to present the work that we've undertaken in the last few months in order to define AXA's purpose. I'm especially happy to be able to share this with you first, our shareholders, who are so important in the mission and the vision that we carry. So Thomas mentioned it. This work, above all for us, was a way of putting words on something which is deeply rooted in the history of the group, in its identity, its values, and which is based around two strong convictions. The first one, it's this acute awareness that companies have a role that is important to play in society at large beyond our economic challenges. This awareness is long-standing. For all those of you who know AXA and who have been following us for a long time, you know well that it is rooted in our DNA and has been there since the creation of our group. Then the fact that we have an immense pride that brings together our people and federates them is related to the fact of being able to carry out this business geared towards the protection of the vital needs of our clients. For us, this purpose will be exactly making those convictions more explicit and take further our commitment. It's all the more important, as Thomas said, in given the crisis and the context of the COVID-19, we believe that it's all the more important to build this confidence in the future together with our people, our staff, with our clients, our stakeholders, but also with you, the shareholders of the group. So a few words to define and share with you the way we undertook such work. What was important for us is to make sure that it be a process of dialogue and convergence. We started by taking the pulse of the organization, trying to understand what could once again bring together and enliven all our 160,000 staff and partners around 57 countries. We put questions on the DNA, the history of the group, the daily work, and also about the external trends, the challenges that we see around the globe, and where our people and the rest believe strongly that AXA can provide answers and contribute to find solutions. Obviously, we looked externally as well. We talked with representatives of all our stakeholders, NGOs, journalists, investors, various partners around our ecosystem in order to understand what are today the expectations towards insurers and more specifically a group such as AXA. All this matter, these testimonials, well, we analyzed them in the course of several workshops that were collaborative in nature and through digital commitment platforms. And this helped us bring out three major accents: protection, the collective, and progress. And if I may, I will briefly just elaborate on each one of them. Well, protection, as I said, is at the heart of our business, has been so since always, but even more so in a world where anticipation and the understanding of risk becomes key. individual protection and also collective protections through our overall role as insurer, but also as investors, we clearly have a responsibility. And progress, lastly, because this has been mentioned again and again in the testimonials and interviews, there's the strong conviction that science, progress, technology, and innovation shall be necessary to take up such challenges. So, this is the result of such a work, acting for human progress by protecting what matters. This is our purpose in the coming months and years, should be that link and consistency between our origins, our roots, and our future ambitions, between our values and our actions, and I would say also between the different cultures of all our employees around the globe. So protecting what matters, as I said, is being able to support our clients for all their universal and essential needs: health, safety, preparation of the future until the old age, and pension, accompanying personal, professional projects, briefly supporting them at each step of their life. But protecting what matters for us will be also to be able to contribute to meet the overall global challenges. And Thomas mentioned that we are starting to commit ourselves very strongly, fighting against climatic change, access to health for everybody, financial inclusion, but also gender equality, or fighting against cyber and technological risks. Acting for human progress is that for us, providing individual answers, but also collective answers to these needs and to these challenges. To end, as you will see, this is an ambitious commitment, that purpose, and for that we really muster our organization at every level. We want to do it through our knowledge and our expertise, of course, our products, our services, through our investments, but also through our ability to innovate, which is ours and which you noticed in the past few minutes, our partnerships, but also our corporate culture, the strength of our brand, and of course, through all our societal commitments. We can count for this on an essential trump card, which is our community of our agents, distributors, staff, and clients, but also, of course, through you, AXA's shareholders. I thank you again, and I'll hand it over again to Thomas. Thank you, Ulrike. I would like to thank all our employees and key partners who, thanks to their actions and their engagements, help AXA to fulfill our missions with these words and turn them into reality to serve our clients. Thank you for your attention. I thank Thomas Bubel and Ulrike Decoen for their presentation. I will now turn it over to Gilles Moek, who is the chief economist for the group, who will present his macroeconomic analysis of the current situation. Good day. The current global recession is unusual because it's very brutal. It reflects a massive or nearly complete freezing of the offer of goods and services. The loss of activity is far more sensitive than during the major recession in 2008 and 9. It is this drop that you can see on this graph. But in exchange of such brutality, even if the normalization of offer and supply conditions is incomplete, with the easing of lockdown, we were hoping for a major bounce, but the real question is the speed of the global growth after this mechanical bounce. Our central hypothesis is a moderation of this pickup as from the fourth quarter, which will give GDP very close to a swoosh, Nike's logo. This is something which we try to illustrate on this graph. All the economies have been hit by the pandemic, but the magnitude of the recession differs quite significantly depending on the duration and severity of the lockdown. The actual real-time indicators have reflected a sharper loss of activity in France and Italy than in the US or in Germany. This is what you see here on the left-hand side. However, even before a total easing lifting of the lockdown, and that's a good piece of news. The recovery is obvious everywhere, and right now we are seeing some kind of catch-up apart from the countries that were the hardest hit. However, the Chinese experience, whose lockdown easing is older than ours, suggests that after the first phase of mechanical recovery, which is the yellow part on the right-hand side, things may become a bit more difficult. Why so? Whilst the supply is becoming normal because there's no lockdown, demand remains weak due to the deterioration of the outlook for jobs, which weigh down on consumption via the behaviors in terms of caution and savings, whilst the investment of companies is hindered by the high level of uncertainty, which is nourished by the risk of a second pandemic wave. This is the weakening of the supply or demand, which makes necessary the maintenance of a massive budgetary stimulus over time after the major urgency that came along. European countries are providing a budgetary effort which is more significant than during the major recession 2008 and 9. This is what you see on the left-hand side. Even Germany has adhered to budgetary activism, but these efforts remain limited relative to what was offered in the United States. There, despite a Congress which is highly polarized, we all know that, they found means to agree on a stimulus which is very generous. On this side of the Atlantic, fortunately, initiatives at the European scale will be coming after the national policies, but according to the Commission itself, we should not hope for massive transfers from the new Stimulus and Resilience Fund before 2022. This is what you see on the right-hand side on this slide. Whilst the political decision on the principle itself of that fund remains a little bit uncertain. This deeper public deficit, which probably is deep and sustainable, cannot be considered without a decisive monetary support. The Fed and the ECB have reacted more strongly and more quickly than in 2008 and 9. The public securities purchasing programs will absorb a major part of the financing needs of the states. The buying of private securities, the allocation of very generous liquidities to banks will allow to avoid any tension or strain on the financial conditions which apply on the private sectors. The very strong inflation of the central bank's balance sheet, which is nearly of the same magnitude on each side of the Atlantic, is a reflection of that liquidity which is necessary, but it nurtures some fears of inflationary shocks. It's not our central scenario, as a matter of fact. There is an acceleration of credit and of the creation of currency. It's temporary. It is the reflection of a compensation, and it probably will lead to decelerate in the coming quarters and months. With regard to the public spending, which is generating public debt, it is replacing private faulty pride, but is not added to it. Even before the pandemic, because the pandemic is not changing everything, we were banking on a long period of historically low interest rates under the effect of the slowdown of the growth of developed economies. Also there's a preference for savings, which is increasingly marked in mature economies, and also it's linked to the structural weakness of inflation and has been so for several decades. The current direction of monetary policies will increase more the rooting at a low level of interest rates. This is what we are showing here for Germany and the US. So what are the risks around our central scenario? Well, we are monitoring very closely the pandemic dynamic. The United States have chosen an approach which protects growth with a lockdown which often was limited and rather short, but which involves also a significant risk-taking. We see now the effects of that with a reacceleration of the pandemic in the US, which is in opposition of this continuing slowdown of the pandemic in Europe. So it's possible that the recovery in the third quarter of the US economy be less dramatic than what that was scheduled. We must monitor also emerging countries. Some of them have an explosive epidemic there. This is the one, this is what you see on the far right of the slide, with the growth of the virus in South America, which is much sharper than what we have experienced in the worst period in Europe, but also with developments in South Africa, which must be monitored closely. So beyond their sensitivity to the epidemic risk, the answer from emerging countries of the economic policies of emerging countries has rarely been as efficient as in the developed world due to the lack of credibility of their central banks. The currencies of emerging countries have very often been strongly devalued, and emerging countries will contribute only very little to the global demand, which could be a more problematic obstacle for the Eurozone than for the US due to the greater dependency on exportation by European countries. Finally, our pickup scenarios depend on the pandemic profile. If there's a persistence of the first wave in the second half of 2020, followed by a second wave in the winter, we believe that a new lockdown would be less severe than in March and April. As a matter of fact, the test and treatment capacity have been increased strongly. The impact on growth will be obviously visible, and central scenario in swoosh would become a W scenario, but with a recession probably less acute than the one we experienced in the spring this year. Let me end with a positive risk. We often talk about adverse risk. It's normal to consider that. This is probably what is more reasonable now. But of course, there's a risk for a rise, for growth, which is all hinging on finding the right medicine or finding a vaccine that would allow to strengthen and reassure investors about the ability to obtain a bounce of our economies in 2021 that would not be hindered by a risk of a new lockdown. If that would take place, I have no doubt that the reacceleration of investments would be much sharper than what we have in our central scenario. But for the moment, we want to stick to an approach that is very cautious about the international macroeconomics. Thank you very much. I thank Gilles Mouet for his presentation, and will now ask Étienne Bois-Laurent to present a summary of the results of 2019. Dear shareholders, good day. By way of introduction, I'd like to come back to the fact that 2019 turned out to be a solid year. A solid year during which we improved our performance according to three priorities. The first priority, revenue up by 5% at 104 million euros, and the second one, a rise in our underlying earnings by share of 5% at 2.59 euros, and lastly, a strengthening of our balance sheet with a solvency ratio up by 5 points at 198%. Let me come back to these three dimensions by starting with revenues. Our targeted segments, those on which we believe we have a positioning that is strong and a competitive edge, and where we also believe that there is a significant growth development, have drawn our organic growth by 5%. First of all, it is the commercial P&C up by 7%, mainly thanks to higher prices, especially with the major risks. Health, plus 6%, rising in individual health and in collective health. And lastly, protection, plus 4%, made up of pure protection and made up of protection with savings. All our insurance segments, including private personal lines and PC, are also growing in 2019. The technical profitability is there as well, with combined ratios which are broadly lower than 100% on our insurance businesses. In an environment of low interest rates, it is essential to be able to improve our technical results in an ongoing way. We are down by 0.6 in terms of the drop of our combined ratio in P&Cs at 96.4. In health, the combined ratio is 94%, and in the protection, the combined ratio is at 93%. They're very good as well. As a result, our underlying earnings are positive across all our lines of businesses. P&C, 3.3 billion euros, is up by 12% thanks to the decline of the combined ratio. Health, with 0.7 billion euros of contribution, is higher by 5% thanks to the growth of our revenues. Life, with 2.9 billion euros of contribution, is slightly down by -1% due to the deliberate slowdown of our business in Switzerland, and asset management at 0.4 billion euros, -3%, due to performance commission that are less. That positive result can be seen across all our regions. France is up by 9%. It benefits from the growth of our P&C. Europe, excluding France, records a slight 1% rise, drawn by P&C, partially compensated by a decline in the life business. Asia and the international continue their steady growth with +6%, thanks mainly to the P&C and health sectors. Lastly, we are recording a positive contribution from AXA XL in the AXA accounts with 500 million euros. To sum up, the underlying earnings are increasing by 2% on a like-for-like currency basis. The results per share are up by 5%, due, of course, to the underlying performance, but due to a positive currency effect. That 5% growth is in line with our long-term trend. The net income is increasing sharply with +75% to hit 3.9 billion euros due to the non-recurring effect of exceptional transactions linked to the disposal of our life insurance business, AXA Equitable Holdings in the United States. I'd like now to comment the trend seen in the first month of the year. In reality, we started off extremely well in January and February with revenues which were close to +10%. And despite the decline in our business in March, due to the COVID-19 crisis, we are displaying now a growth in the first quarter up by 4%. And once again, it is our target segments which stand out with +5% in P&Cs, always still driven by higher prices, with companies +8% in regard to health, which benefits from a rise from volumes and from prices, and lastly +3% in the protection arena. But the leading event this year was obviously the COVID-19 epidemic. This one should generate a decline of our business in the second quarter in 2020, but above all, claims cost up by about 1.2 billion euros after taxes. The latter are generated mainly and firstly by the insurance of operating expenses or production expenses, but also the insurance of the cancellation of events, and thirdly, due to insurance related to traveling. These costs or these claims being up are compensated by the frequency of claims in the motor insurance. Finally, we spent 0.4 billion euros or 0.3 billion euros net of taxes by way of the solidarity efforts evoked by Thomas Google at the start of our session. This crisis obviously has a strong impact on our result this year. On the other hand, our balance sheet remains very robust. The solvency ratio remains above 180% at the end of March, and the ratings agencies confirmed the AA- rating for the AXA Group for March and April this year. As a result, we are offering to pay a dividend of 0.73 euros, which corresponds approximately to half of what we had considered initially and announced during the presentation of our accounts on February 20th, 2020. That amount reflects two realities. On the one hand, a 2019 result very solid and a 2020 balance sheet also very solid. And on the other hand, it reflects a call for caution issued by the regulators, the French regulators of the insurance business with regard to the payout of dividends this year. If this proposal is approved, the dividend would be detached on the 7th of July and paid out on the 9th of July this year. An additional payment could be paid out at the end of the year, could go up to 0.7 euros if the regulatory conditions and the market conditions are favorable in the next few months. I would like to end my presentation with a few comments on our stock price trend. The share price of AXA is slightly down compared to the performance of the insurance sector in Europe. Since the beginning of the year, we have experienced four key moments. The first one was the announcements of the accounts in February with very good results then, but also a AXA XL contribution down compared to the market's expectations. Now, the second moment was in March, the undifferentiated fall of the markets following the impact of the crisis, COVID-19. And in April and in May, it was a period where people were in a wait-and-see mode with markets which were eager to understand the exact impact of the claims factor related to COVID-19 on our accounts, and they had issues about our dividend policy, and lastly, a catch-up that was partially following our 3rd of June publishing that gave answers about these two expectations from the market. And lastly, I'd like to inform you that our next financial communication will be on the 6th of August when we publish our half-year results. Thank you very much for your attention.
We'd like to thank Etienne Bois-Laurent for his presentation. I would like to ask Jean-Pierre Clamadieu to present to you the governance mechanisms of the company and the compensation policy of its key executives. Thank you, Denis. Ladies and gentlemen, dear shareholders, as lead independent director, it is my duty to report on the way AXA governance mechanisms have been operating in 2019 and also to report on the compensation policy of our key executives. As you can see up on the screen, the current makeup of the board of directors has 14 members, 8 women, 6 men, with 8 different nationalities. The proportion of women on the board, not including the employee and employee shareholder representatives, is 45% today, and provided that you approve the proposed resolutions, will increase to 54% at the end of this shareholders meeting. And also, and again, provided that you approve this, at the end of the meeting, the board will be composed of 56% of non-French members. This diversity, which combines with a great variety in occupations, track records, skill sets, obviously facilitates the depth and the quality of debates and exchanges on this board. Among those criteria defined to select board members, there is the pursuit for the appropriate equilibrium between the technical skill sets, professional experience, as well as diversity in terms of age, nationality, and cultures. Every year, as the French AFEP-MEDEF code such requires, we assess the independence of each director. Since 2020, the board of directors has considered that 9 of its members out of 15 could be considered as independent. The slide, which is up on your screen, shows a summary view of the way the board of directors operates. It is the duty of the board of directors to take the most critical decisions, i.e. to decide that we separated the duties of the chair of the board of directors and the CEO, and to appoint the CEO. And this was done a couple of years ago. The board benefits from 3 board committees, which play a key role in preparing for decisions via its recommendations to the board of directors. In my capacity as lead independent director, it is my special duty to make sure that independent directors play their role, which is a very significant one. Practically speaking, I participate in preparing each board of directors meeting in conjunction with the chairperson of the board and the CEO. We review together the schedule of meetings, the agendas, as well as the documents being circulated to the board members. With respect to the work and operations of the board, fiscal 2019 was very intense. The board met 10 times with an attendance rate, average attendance rate of 99%. The 3 board committees met 16 times with an average attendance rate of 97%. We addressed many different items and topics, among which I would mention group strategy. For the last few months, of course, the management of the health-related COVID crisis, the management of Excel integration, significant acquisitions and disposals, the determination and appropriation of earnings, annual and half-yearly financial statements, the policy with respect to shareholders' equity management, dividend payout, the review of the own risk and solvency assessment report, the ORSA report, AXA's internal model, as well as policies in the context of Solvency II, the IT security, cyber risk security, as well as the review of the risk with respect to corporate social responsibility, the review of HR policies, and, of course, the way the board and the board committees are composed. As is the case every year, we assess the way the board operates. And in 2019, this process was conducted internally. In fact, every year we have internal assessment and external assessments, for which we call upon an outside service provider. This year, each board member answered a written questionnaire in writing and had an individual interview with the chairman of the board, and was able to express his or her opinion on board member participation and board member contribution. So conclusions on personal contribution of each director were communicated by the chair of the board to each and every one of the board members during individual interviews. I also conducted individual interviews with each board member to collect their opinions, their suggestions with respect to the individual contribution of the chair, and I was able to share this with the chairperson of the board of directors. The general conclusions of the self-assessments and the key areas for development were reviewed in full detail by the Compensation and Governance Committee, which expressed recommendations which were submitted to the board and approved by it in its December meeting. At the end of this process, the board members expressed a very favorable opinion with respect to the way the board has been operating, noting that the recommendations which were expressed during previous reviews were largely implemented. Of course, there are always areas for improvements, and during this self-assessment, we reviewed the process for selecting future board members, and we noted that we could still improve the selection process by being very watchful as to the balance of skill sets and experience, by involving the members of the board more largely in the selection process, and especially those board committee chairpersons when potential candidates are eligible to sit on those committees. In the assessment process, we noted it was important that all board members be involved in the process to set the objectives and goals for the CEO, to assess his performance and to define his compensation. And we organized a number of executive sessions before key final decisions were made. And then we have decided that continual regular discussions be organized between the board, the CEO, and the various board members with respect to all types of items and information, current news on the industry, which basically feed into the thinking process and judgment of board members. Now, with respect to the composition of this board of directors, during our shareholders meeting, you will be recommended to reappoint two board members. Ms. Angelise Keman, you have a resume on the screen. She's been a board member to your company since 2016, and she's been a member of the Audit Committee. And to also reappoint Irene Dorner, who has been a director of the AXA Group since 2016, and who chairs the Audit Committee today. Irene Dorner accepted to occupy this role and to replace Stéphane Lippe, whom, as you may know, recently passed away. With the other board members, we were deeply saddened by the passing away of Stéphane Lippe, and we deplore the loss of an exemplary director, a friend of AXA, and a friend of all directors and employees alike. Stéphane, in his capacity as chairman of the Audit Committee, played a very key role in the board. With his experience, with his expertise, with his very high dedication to the work and operation of the board and its board committees, his contribution was key and critical to fuel the development of AXA. Jointly with the other board members, we want once again to pay tribute to Stéphane and to express our deep sympathy to his family and relatives. I would also like to warmly thank Irene Dorner, who accepted to replace Stéphane Lippe and chair the Audit Committee, that she's been a member of for 4 years. And we recommend to the shareholders meeting that you reappoint her as a director. In the course of this shareholders meeting, we suggest that you appoint 3 new directors, Madame Isabelle Hudson, Madame Marie-France Chodin, and Mr. Antoine Gosset-Granville. Antoine Gosset-Granville will be replacing François Martineau, who expressed to the board that he wished not to be reappointed after 12 years of service. I would like here again to take the opportunity, in the name of the other board members, to very warmly thank François Martineau for the very high quality of his contributions to the board during the last 12 years. Now, with respect to Mr. Antoine Gosset-Granville, the board of directors recommends his appointment based on his very extensive experience, his legal expertise, and his very deep knowledge of the financial services sector. As you can see on his resume, which is up on the screen, Antoine Gosset-Granville is a partner, lawyer and barrister with BDGS Partners firm. He occupied the role as a Deputy General Secretary to the European Monetary Committee, then to the Financial and Economic Committee of the European Union. He was then a counselor in economic affairs with the European Commissioner in charge of trade, and he served as Deputy CEO of the Caisse Dépôt and Consignation. Madame Isabelle Hudson was selected as a board member due to her great knowledge of the insurance industry and her great experience as an executive. During her career, Isabelle Hudson occupied roles as chair of Prudential International, chair of National House Building Council, and CEO of Synesis Life Limited. She's currently director of BT Group. Marie-France Trudin has been selected based on her international experience, her executive manager profile, and her skill sets in the field of healthcare. She has more than 25 years of experience in the pharma industry, and after 10 years on the board of Sigielne International, she joined Novartis in 2017 and currently chairs Novartis Pharmaceuticals and sits on the executive committee of Novartis. The board of directors reviewed the situation of these three people with respect to the AFEP-MEDEF code recommendations and concluded they could be considered as independent. I also inform you that Doina Palici-Chebab has been a director since 2012 with a term of office expiring, and would like again to thank her for her dedication to the board during the last 8 years. To replace Madame Doina Palici-Chebab as a representative of employees, there are 7 names who are submitted to your voting. These 7 names were appointed by the employee shareholders on the occasion of an election which was organized in the early part of this year. Helen Brown is the candidate which your board of directors is recommending. She received strong support of shareholder employees during the preliminary selection phase by collecting 55% of the votes. Helen Brown joined the AXA legal department in 2001 after starting her career with the Linklaters firm, where she worked in London, Brussels, and Paris. Since 2016, she's been the legal counsel of the AXA Group, and in this capacity, she was engaged in and deeply involved in the large strategic projects of the group. She will be able to share her deep knowledge of the insurance industry, of governance practices, and of her international exposure, and will be benefiting from these skill sets on the board. After this review of the way the AXA governance mechanisms operate, I would now like to report on the compensation policy for the key executives of AXA. In line with legal provisions, your shareholders meeting is asked to decide on the compensation components paid in the course of fiscal 2019 or allocated in the course of fiscal 2019 to each company officer in the context of the compensation policy for fiscal 2020. 6 resolutions will be submitted to your voting. 3 resolutions for ex-post compensation of the chairman of the board, the CEO, and the directors, and 3 resolutions based on or covering the ex-ante compensations. In this context, you will have a summary in the table which is up on the screen, the various components of the compensation packages of the key executives of AXA. The cash compensation, the short-term cash compensation, is composed of fixed salary and part of annual variable compensation. That is the portion which is paid out during the year. Then come deferred compensation, which is composed of the other part of the annual various compensation and performance shares. This compensation structure aims at fostering cohesion and coverage and convergence and alignment of the interest of management with that of the company and that of its shareholders. In the preparation of these recommendations to your meeting, the Compensation and Governance Committee assesses all of these compensation components. The committee reviews, obviously, the compensation practices in the industry, looking at comparable companies in the European and global market. We have very simple objectives, that is to put forward a consistent, coherent compensation structure with competitive compensation levels to incentivize and encourage performance and to align the compensation paid out with the performance of the company. The committee regularly reviews the general principles for setting compensation policies and suggests any necessary adjustments. We see to it that there is internal fairness and equity and that individual and collective performance is well taken into consideration. With respect to the CEO, the board decided to set annual target compensation for the CEO to 2.9 million euros. This compensation is broken down into a fixed pay and a target variable compensation. The annual fixed compensation for the CEO is 1,450,000 euros, and his annual target variable compensation, which is fully submitted to performance terms and conditions, which are very drastic and which are aligned with group strategy, is also 1,450,000 euros. Setting the amount of total compensation for the CEO, as well as the general equilibrium between the fixed and variable components, are based on a study which is conducted in an external firm, by an external firm, based on a sample of companies of the French CAC 40 index, as well as based on the key international companies in the financial services industry. And in order to have the CEO share in value creation over the long term, the board of directors allocates every year so-called long-term incentives in the form of performance shares, and this has been the case ever since stock options have been done away with in June of 2019 by the board of directors. These performance shares are submitted to performance terms and conditions which are very drastic, which are very demanding, which are internal and external terms, and which do not guarantee any minimum compensation. They represent a significant share in the CEO's compensation, and the value of performance shares that are allocated to him is determined in a way to position global compensation between the medium and the third quartile of the market benchmark. And remember that the CEO has no defined benefit pension plan, that is supplementary pension plan. He benefits similarly to any executive of the group from the performance share plan dedicated to retirement, and he benefits from a severance compensation package, the amount being set to 12 months of compensation, which is increased by one additional month of service without the total exceeding 24 months. I would add that the target compensation for the CEO has remained unchanged since he was appointed in 2016 and will remain unchanged and identical in fiscal 2020. Given the expected drop in the performance and bottom line of the group for fiscal 2020 due to the COVID crisis, the variable compensation for fiscal 2020 in both cash and securities will be significantly and adversely impacted. And this follows the logic of our compensation policy, of course. Now, the board of directors also set the compensation for the chairman of our board. In line with the recommendation of the French AFEP-MEDEF code, the board considered that the compensation structure which would be the most appropriate would consist in only setting fixed compensation for the board chairman. In line with the setting, or with a view, to setting the compensation for the chairman of the board, the board used an external benchmark. The board took into consideration the fact that Denis Duverne asked to go into retirement and decided that he would waive the right of a supplementary pension package amounting to some 750,000 euros. Denis Duverne decided he would only benefit from this at the end of his term of service as chairman of the board without any retrospective payout. In such circumstances, the board decided to set the amount of the annual compensation for the chairman of the board to 1,200,000 euros, knowing that this compensation level remains unchanged since he was appointed to the job in 2016. I suggest now we review the variable compensation package allocated to the CEO for fiscal 2019. The assessment of performance is based on two components: group collective performance, accounting for 50% of the variable compensation, and individual performance level, which accounts for the other half. Group performance is assessed based on 4 criteria: underlying earnings per share, adjusted profitability of share of equity, the revenues of the key priority segments of commercial P&C, protection and healthcare, and the NPS score. These selected indicators are directly connected with the strategic directions set by the group and are based on reaching an amount or reaching a target score. You have here the weighting assigned to each one of these indicators, as well as the rate of achievement for fiscal 2019. So the group performance established itself at 108%. Individual performance is assessed based on specific goals and targets, which are revised every year. There are a number of qualitative and quantitative goals, targets, and indicators. They are set by the board of directors, and they are the subject of a so-called target setting letter. For fiscal 2019, the board assessed Thomas Buberl's individual performance based on the targets and goals as set in his target setting letter. Number 1, Excel's integration process. Number 2, the development of innovation to support the acceleration of the payer-to-partner strategy, continuation of the transformation of AXA's portfolios, the development of a corporate culture, transformation of the leadership group, and development of the CEO's leadership style, and last point, the execution of strategic initiatives. Our assessment of Thomas Buberl's performance led us to assess it and assess the achievement rate at 114.5%. And you have here the various components of this. So actual variable compensation for fiscal 2019 to be paid out to the CEO, provided you approve this, reaches 1,609,500 euros, i.e., 111% of his target variable compensation, which, according to us, illustrates Thomas Buberl's performance in the course of fiscal 2019. In application of the compensation policy, which was voted by the shareholders in meeting, the board of directors repeated the mechanism of deferred compensation payments to an amount of 30% of the variable compensation for fiscal 2019. In line with this deferred payout mechanism, the deferred amount of variable compensation will be paid out in 2 tranches, respectively in 2021 and 2022. The amount actually paid out will vary depending on the change in stock price of the AXA stock during the payment of deferment within the limits of a floor equal to 80% of the deferred payout, and 120% of this amount. The introduction of the deferred arrangement is aimed at strengthening the alignment of AXA with the international practices and regulations which are in effect in the financial services industry with respect to compensating its key executives. As I told you, the board regularly assesses its compensation policy, factoring in feedback we get from our shareholders during the governance roadshows, which we conduct jointly with the chairman of the board. And it was decided that starting from fiscal 2020, the weighting of group performance in the assessment of the variable performance of the CEO will be increased to 70%, which mechanically reduces the weighting of individual performance down to 30%. With this change, the board and the committee has wanted to reinforce the group performance fraction and the quantifiable components in line with market practices as was observed in France and in other countries across the world. And this change, and I want to underline this, will further accentuate the impact of the financial crisis on the variable compensation package of our CEO for fiscal 2020. Also, the group has been conducting a policy to allocate performance shares to its employees in France and outside of France. All beneficiaries, and there were 7,000 beneficiaries for the 2019 performance share plan, are subject to performance terms and conditions for 100% of the allocated shares. Performance criteria cover group performance, the performance level of the home business unit of the beneficiary for 50%, and the group performance with respect to its corporate social responsibility requirements, which shows the importance we pay to this criteria. And we use the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for assessing this performance, which accounts for 10% of total performance. Finally, and this is in line with the best industry practices, as well as with the recommendations of industry regulators and other stakeholders, the performance shares allocated to the CEO, in addition to being subject to a lock-up period of 3 years, are subject to a vesting period of 3 years and to a 2-year lockup period. In June of 2019, 133,458 performance shares with an IFRS values of 2,024,558 euros were granted to the CEO. I want to mention that performance share allocations is being conducted without diluting value for the shareholders, given the choice made to deliver existing shares. These compensation components are described in more detail in the Universal Registration document of AXA for fiscal 2019. This document is available to you on the website of the company, and if you want more information, please refer to this document. A few words, finally, with respect to the employee shareholding policy and the profit-sharing mechanisms for AXA employees. For many years, AXA has been conducting a very aggressive policy to foster employee shareholding. Every year, in every country of the world where we operate, there is an employee shareholding program called Share Plan, which is organized in the form of a capital increase reserved to them. In 2019, more than 26,000 employees in 40 countries took part in this capital increase operation for a total amount of more than 375 million euros, corresponding to the issue of 18 million new shares. To eliminate the dilutive effect of the Share Plan, the buyback and the cancellation of the same amount of shares was conducted. As at 31st of December 2019, the employees and agents of the group held 4.3% of the share capital of the company and 6.1% of the voting right of the company. Thank you for your attention.
Merci Jean-Pierre Clamadieu pour cette présentation très claire. Je vous indique...
Thank you to Jean-Pierre Clamadieu for this very clear presentation. I want to tell you that the corporate governance reports under Articles L22535 and sequel of the Commercial Code is on page 477 of the annual report for fiscal 2019. Now I turn over to Bénédicte Vignon of PricewaterhouseCoopers and Jean-Claude Pauly of Mazars, who will present their summarized report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Good day, shareholders. We've issued this year 6 reports to present to your general meeting. I will now present the reports on the annual and consolidated accounts, as well as the report on third-party agreements, and I will turn it over to Jean-Claude Pauly to present the reports on transactions related to the capital element. With regard to our annual and consolidated accounts, of basic mission is to have a reasonable reassurance about the truthfulness, the accuracy of the accounts, and making sure that there are no significant misstatements by relying on the audit work undertaken by our 2 consultants in all the entities that are significant in the AXA Group scope. First of all, report on AXA Inc. We have issued an unqualified opinion on the accounts. In terms of the key audit point, we have developed our assessments on the assessment on the various securities. With regard to the specific verifications in accordance with the law, as well as the other information that was communicated to you, we have no observations to make. Second report on the consolidated accounts of the group. We also issued an unqualified opinion on the accounts of the group. We developed 3 key audit points this year. The first one, in terms of assessing the life savings and pension reserves, including the acquisition costs. Secondly, the reserves for P&C claims, and especially for long insurance risk. And finally, assessing the recoverable goodwill, in particular for the AXA XL cash-generating unit. Regarding the group's administration, no observation on the accuracy and compliance with the consolidated accounts information given in this report. We remind you that the accounts closed on the 31st of December 2019 have not been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, which are analyzed as an event coming after the closing, and information has given in this regard in the appendix and in this general meeting. Now, regarding third-party agreements, we remind you that the goal of our diligence as auditors aim at bringing to the knowledge of the general meeting the third-party agreements we are aware of, and our work has no aim to make a decision on their usefulness or their merits. We inform you that we were given an opinion on no authorized third party. There are 2 third-party agreements already approved, whose execution continued in 2019 after 2018. A first agreement towards Thomas Buber following the foregoing of his work contract and dealing with a social protection regime, and also towards Mr. David Duverne, bearing about the benefit of a social protection regime following his foregoing of his work contract. I now turn it over to Jean-Claude Pauly. Good day, ladies and gentlemen, shareholders. You are convened here in this AGM and in the form of an extraordinary meeting to approve a number of transactions on the capital of your equity. In this respect, we have 3 reports dealing about delegations to prove for your board. We have 2 reports, first of all, dealing with resolutions 18 and 19, which are shown pages 44, 46 of your you want to delegate to your board for 18 months, and as part of 135 million euros sealing the authorization to proceed with the following actions. First of all, issuing an ordinary shares, giving access to equity and reserve for those who are part of a corporate savings plan with removal of a preferential right for, and then an increase of corporate capital with the issuance of ordinary shares with in favor of a category of determined beneficiaries. We have no specific observations to make. That transactions have been set. Definitely later on we'll make, if necessary, an additional report. Our last report is shown on page 48 of the notice to call. It's the 20th resolution. It's about delegating to your board of directors the authorization to proceed with a reduction in capital with a limit of 10% of the corporate capital for a period over 24 months. We have decided that we have no observation to make on the causes and conditions of the reduction of the considered capital. On behalf of the auditors, I thank you for your attention. I thank our auditors, and we will now move on to the shareholders from the questions of our shareholders. I inform you that prior to your AGM, we received 5 questions written by shareholders that were addressed. For the first one, by the Forum for Investissement Responsable, dealing about the environmental challenges and as they relate to CSR. For the second one, by Mr. Delpech, about our strategic plan, Ambition 2020. Mr. Adler was, his third question is about preferential prices for shareholders, and the fourth comes from Mr. Kircher, dealing about the rental of housing, and the fifth, Les Amis de la Terre, Eric Finance, dealing with our commitments in terms towards the environment. These questions and the answers given by the board are shown on our website in a heading dedicated to the questions and answers. Additionally, given the impossibility of welcoming you physically, given the exceptional circumstances that we have already evoked, and to ensure a rich dialogue with shareholders, we've put in place before that meeting a digital platform to collect your questions. By the way, we were not able to check from a distance if you are a shareholder. These questions, therefore, are not part of the legal framework of the written questions of the general meeting, and this collection was done respecting your anonymity, so we don't know yet the identity of the people who sent us their questions. We have clustered these questions by big category, and let's discover them now. Sophie Bourlange, who is in charge of communication with individual and employee shareholders that many of you know, will be your spokesperson during this sequence. Good day, everyone, and thank you for your questions. You can see on the screen the main topics that bore your attention. Nearly 1/3 of your questions are about dividend payout. 20% are related to AXA strategy and 10% to client relationship. 6% are about our CSR policy, and 6% also are about our top leaders' remuneration. Across the board, we see the impact of the COVID-19 is present in 50% of the questions received, including every topic. Let's start immediately with the questions regarding the dividend payout policy. Why did you choose to pay out a smaller dividend for 2019? Are you planning for an additional payout this year? Another question about the terms related to the payment of a dividend. Why not offer the possibility to opt for the payment of the dividend in shares? This question is the most widely raised by our shareholders on the platform, and Etienne and Thomas have spoken about it already during their presentation. I'll come back to it. Following the recent information from the EIOPA and the ACPR, the French regulator, as it relates to having a cautious approach in terms of the dividend payout during the pandemic, the board at AXA decided to reduce the payout by €1.40 down to €0.73 per share. The board will consider to propose an additional payment to shareholders in the fourth quarter 2020 that could reach at least 0.70 cents per share and corresponding to an exceptional payout of our reserves only if the market conditions and the regulatory conditions are favorable at that period. If the board would decide to offer an additional payment, that proposal would naturally be submitted to the approval of shareholders during an AGM that would be an ad hoc one. As Etienne and Thomas mentioned it, through that decision, we are showing our sense of responsibility towards institutional and individual shareholders of AXA while adopting a cautious approach given the current environment. The payment of dividends in shares gives possibilities to shareholders to choose how they want to have their dividend paid in cash or in shares. We have not chosen that option, especially to avoid a negative reaction of the market in terms of level of cash and capitalization of the group, whilst actually AXA has the ability to pay that dividend in cash and also to avoid the creation of new shares that could contribute to a dilution of the profit or the earnings per share. The question about the manager's remuneration has been mentioned. The remuneration of many managers in numerous companies will be declined this year in repercussion of the crisis as it relates to COVID-19. What about AXA? I mean, this remuneration of the executives are indexed on the performance of the company. Their variable remuneration 2020, especially the one of the CEO, as reminded to us by Jean-Pierre Cladadieu, will be strongly impacted by the crisis. In my case, given the case with the context of COVID-19 and through solidarity with the executive teams of the group, I decided to forego 25% of my remuneration, which is a fixed one, that non-attributed remuneration with the expenses will be paid by AXA to charities. Concerning AXA's relations with its clients, there's a question about the impact of the COVID-19. Do you fear to lose customers in France following the controversies about operating losses? Thomas Google, over please for this question. As you've seen during the presentation, our responsibility during this crisis was to support all our policyholders. The 160,000 employees and AXA's partners have done their best day and night to help our clients who are the most impacted by the lockdown steps, and in order to be present to help them. Especially, we are aware of the difficulties run into by many restaurant owners, especially in France. This sector represents 20,000 contracts out of our 7 million policy holders and our 300,000 corporate contracts in France. Very few of them were insured against the risk of operation loss without damage. For them, we put in place solidarity measures that are outside of the contract, which I described in my earlier presentation. A small minority of those contracts was not 100% clear in the way they were in their language. In that case, we favored a dialogue with them to find solutions together. I can tell you today that we found an agreement with several hundreds of these restaurant owners so that we can cover a substantial part of their expenses. And we shall continue to dialogue with them in order to work with each restaurant owner to find a solution in case of a contract that is not clear. And lastly, we trust that we can maintain our commercial momentum, which we are underlining during our annual results. AXA shareholders also had some question marks about the integration of service quality in the organization of the group, with questions that can be summarized in the following manner. How is the quality of service to customers promoted in the various entities in the group? Thomas, over to you, please. Customer satisfaction is a major priority for AXA. It's one of the four values shared across our 160,000 employees and partners. The others are about courage, integrity, and certainly working together as one AXA. It is also a central goal in our Ambition 2020 plan. The transformation and the simplification of the group structure initiated in 2016 aims, as a matter of fact, in getting us closer to our customers and better meet digital expectations. This is the sense of our strategy, payer to partner. In other words, how can we be no longer a payer of claims, but also the partner of our policyholders? We've been measuring for many years the customer satisfaction thanks to the Net Promoter Score, an indicator that reports about their tendency to reorder, to recommend, refer AXA to their friends and others, and we set ambitious ambitions to our entities in our key markets. Our aim is to obtain a satisfaction score which is equal or superior to the average of our competitors. That goal represents 20% of the variable remuneration of our local managers. Our efforts in terms of simplification of customers' journeys and improvement of the user's experience are bearing fruit. 75% of our markets have achieved their NPS goal, the Net Promoter Score, in 2019, sharply higher compared to previous years. Strategically now, we received several questions concerning AXA's scope and footprint. Is it stabilized now? And what is your strategy in the countries where the group doesn't have critical size? This is a question that we deal with a lot at the board, Thomas. Since 2016, AXA has defined and implemented in a resolute manner a transformation strategy in order to foresee, but also meet the new trends that impact the economies and the development of our customers' expectations. One of the goals of our strategy is to simplify the group and refocus it so that we can speed up our development in order to provide much more added value to our customers. Its implementation has led us to invest in innovation and focus on countries where AXA has strong positions. The group obtains in those countries nearly 90% of its bottom line and its results. In addition, we have engaged ourselves in a stronger growth, especially through innovative initiatives for our customers, such as making available telemedicine services and customer journeys, fully digital, and health offers that are far more exhaustive, as I presented before. Such strategy has also led us to review our portfolio of assets in a number of countries. Following that consideration, we choose to strengthen our presence in a number of countries by investing there, as we did recently in China, in Mexico, or in Egypt. So we're searching for partners who are more in a better position the development of the entities that we'd rather dispose of. This is mainly the meaning of the disposals of our banking disposal in Belgium, but also our subsidiaries in Poland, in the Czech Republic, and in Slovakia. These transactions help us to continue the simplification of AXA's profile obviously in line with a strategic plan called Ambition 2020. In Belgium, that disposal comes along with a strengthening of our presence in our target segments. Such acquisitions and disposals are taken forward consistently with our DNA and our history, which has always managed with an agile way its portfolio of business. Other question frequently asked related to the strategy. How is AXA facing the increase of the frequency of natural catastrophes in the world? Does it challenge or call into question your strategic choices? Over to Thomas again. Look, we are noticing, as a matter of fact, in the past 3 years, a rise in the severity on the one hand, but also in the frequency of climatic events. It is legitimate to think that this is one of the consequences of the climate change, but that causality and the impact on claims and the profitability of our insurance business, we can assess it only over the long term. In the short term, the annual renegotiation of contracts allows us to operate dynamic adjustments and adjust either the amount of the premiums or the cover to the development of the claims situation. This is what we do within our AXA XL subsidiary, with price effects that are quite substantial in 2019, plus 10% over the year, and between 11 and plus 14% in the third and fourth quarter of 2019. This is ongoing this year, and we are adjusting, in addition to that, our appetite for that kind of risk by adjusting our reinsurance cover each year. In addition, we are one of the market players that has its own modeling tool in regard to nat cats, and that tool allows us to develop our own forward-looking scenarios and better control our risks. Over the longer term, the rise in frequency of nat cats confirms our strategic choices in the face of climatic changes that become more complex and more difficult to manage. Our companies and societies will need solid experts, global, able to provide them with answers that are the right ones and innovative at once. AXA is certainly one of those players. Lastly, regarding the corporate social responsibility, questions were about AXA's ambition in the fight against global warming, the economic crisis we're going through. Will it call into question your commitment in favor of the climate? Again, a question for you, Thomas. Thank you, Dennis. The crisis is not calling into question, not at all, our commitment in the fight in favor of the climate. On the contrary, as you were able to notice in the presentation, AXA has a strong leadership in the fight against climatic change, and we are fully engaged in the implementation of our climate strategy. The economic crisis that we're going through spurs us to commit ourselves even more in favor of a green stimulus. This is one reason why I recently accepted to take the leadership of a working group of a global economic forum to support the implementation of the European Green Deal and find concrete steps in the implementation of the Green Deal. Thank you, Sophie Bourlange, and I thank you for your questions. We will now be able to address the resolutions that were submitted to your shareholders. This voting was closed since yesterday at 3 p.m. We will read you now the results of the voting. We were asked to decide on 28 resolutions. 23 are part of the ordinary general meeting and 5 are part of the extraordinary general meeting. The first 23 resolutions were part of the ordinary session. The first resolution aimed at approving the corporate accounts of 2019. The resolution is carried. The second resolution was about approving the consolidated financial statements for 2019 fiscal year. It was approved. The third resolution aimed at approving the earnings appropriation for the 2019 fiscal year and declaration of a dividend of 0.73 euros per share. This resolution is carried as well. The fourth resolution aimed at approving the information referred to in Article L. 225-37-31 of the French Commercial Code relating to the compensation of corporate officers. This resolution is carried. The fifth resolution aimed at approving the individual compensation of Mr. Denis Duverne, Chairman of the Board of Directors for 2019. It is approved. The sixth resolution aimed at approving the individual compensation of Mr. Thomas Burbel, Chief Executive Officer for 2019. This resolution has been adopted. The seventh resolution aimed at approving the compensation policy of the CEO in accordance with Article L. 225-37-2 of the French Commercial Code. It is carried. Eighth resolution, approval of the compensation policy for the chairman of the board of directors in accordance with Article L. 225-37-2 of the Commercial French Code. It is carried. Ninth resolution, approving the compensation policy for the directors of the company in accordance with Article L. 225-37-2 of the French Commercial Code. It is approved. The 10th resolution aimed at approving the statutory auditor's special report on regulated agreements. It is carried. The 11th resolution aimed at reappointing Mrs. Angeline Kemna as director for a term of 4 years. It is approved. The 12th resolution aimed at reappointing Mrs. Irene Dorma as director. The resolution is approved. The 14th resolution aimed at appointing Mrs. Isabel Hudson as director for a 4-year term. It is approved. The 14th resolution, the appointment of Mr. Antoine Gosset-Granville as director for a 4-year term. It is approved. The 15th resolution aimed at appointing Mrs. Marie-France Choudin as director for a 4-year term. The resolution is carried. Now, the 7 candidates now are displayed. Now, 16th resolution AA from A to F to appoint the employee representatives. The term of Mrs. Chibab, her term is expiring following this presentation. You were asked to make your choice between the 7 candidates, and their names are on the screen. Mrs. Helen Brown was recommended by the board.
The result of voting for the 16th resolution and resolutions A to F. Only the 16th resolution got half of positive votes. This resolution is carried, and Ms. Helen Brown is elected as a director representing employee shareholders. The 17th resolution aimed at authorizing the board of directors to purchase ordinary shares of the company. This resolution is carried. The next 5 resolutions were extraordinary shareholder meeting business. The 18th resolution aimed at granting delegation power to the board of directors to increase the share capital of the company by issuing ordinary shares or securities giving a claim to the company's ordinary shares reserved for employees enrolled in an employer-sponsored company savings plan without preferential subscription rights of the shareholders. Resolution carried. 19th resolution aimed at granting delegation of power to the board of directors to increase the share capital of the company by issuing ordinary shares without preferential subscription rights of the shareholders in favor of a specific category of beneficiaries. The 19th resolution is carried. The 20th resolution aimed at authorizing the board of directors to reduce the share capital through cancellation of ordinary shares. This 20th resolution is approved. The 21st resolution aimed at amending Article 10(d)(1) of the company's bylaws with respect to the employee representative shareholders, which is carried. The 22nd resolution is with respect to authorizing management to comply with all formal requirements in connection with the shareholders meeting resolution, which is approved. Ladies and gentlemen, dear shareholders, let me once again thank you for attending the shareholders meeting and thanking you for your trust. Obviously, I deplore the fact that we couldn't meet in person this year, and we will meet again in person next year for our meeting of shareholders, which is scheduled on the 29th of April 2021 in Salle Pleyel in Paris, France. And in late 2020, if the board of directors of AXA decides, provided market conditions are positive, the board of directors might organize a special ad hoc shareholders meeting to decide on an exceptional dividend payout. Of course, we will be meeting you during financial and investor meetings in due course. The investor relations teams of AXA will keep you informed about these events. And also, please know that today, the so-called integrated AXA report has been published today, reviewing all strategy and numbers and performance of the group. Now, I officially adjourn the meeting, and please read and watch this integrated report, which is now being displayed on the screen by way of this video. Interviews between Thomas Buberl. Strategy, performance, outlook, and prospects. Our measures and activities. Discover how AXA acts as a partner for its 108 million corporate and retail clients. More than 30 AXA employees share their expertise in 4 areas of business activity. Climate resilience for 1, healthcare for 2, corporates for 3, and female entrepreneurship for 4. The researchers of the AXA Research Funds inspire us all to look into the future. The quality of healthcare should not only be theoretical, it should be fully embraced by the population. The analysis of adverse risk reinforces our ability to anticipate on the part of companies how AXA designs solutions for its clients to prevent natural disasters in real time, to co-produce innovative solutions for managing risks. Our impact. Be useful to our customers, clients, and to societies at large. To create sustainable value, to have key performance indicators, to have drivers for action available. Our impact on communities. Understand, anticipate, manage risks. These are excerpts of the annual report. AXA, our sustainable value creation. Act for human progress by protecting what matters. Act for human progress by protecting what matters.